Hello guys and welcome to my new video, and today we're going to be looking at Preservation Evoker, or the changes that are going to be applied to this healer in patch 10.0.5. all of the things that are happening in terms of temporal anomaly, what is happening to HPS, what is happening to gameplay, what is happening to this healer. Is it time to reroll? It's not that bad. Let's go and have a look at all the patch note changes and how it's working on live servers versus PTR and the actual gameplay alterations. Right now what you're seeing on the screen are all the changes that are proposed for Preservation Evoker in the patch 10.0.5. Again, the list of changes is not as big as it is compared to something like Discipline Priest or Mysterious Monk, but these are some significant alterations to this class, and they might impact your gameplay depending on how you're playing Evoker right now. So the biggest thing that's happening to Evoker is going to be Temporal Anomaly. They're redesigning this spell in a significant way. So right now, redesigning the delivery method of Temporal Anomalies, Absorb Shields. Absorb shields are now applied to all allies it passes through, with an absorb effectiveness reduced beyond 5 targets. It used to be it pulls 3 times and heals 2 allies per pulse, and therefore applies echoes if you have Resonating Sphere talent. We'll talk about this. Its speed has also been increased by 40%, and the orb will no longer slow down when it detects allies in its radius. Overall, without reading too much into it, I think this is a quality of life improvement to this ability. Let's go and have a look at how it works on live servers right now. And on the live servers right now, just to showcase how Temporal Anomaly works, again, if you have this spell and if you have this talent in terms of Resonating Sphere, you'll notice that your Temporal Anomaly is going to pulse 3 times, and every pulse is going to apply Absorb to 2 players, and it also is going to apply Echoes. So a total of 6 Absorbs and 6 Echoes if you have these 2 talents, and you probably will, especially in something like Raid environment. And just to showcase how it works, again, you're probably fully aware of this, but we're going to send out Temporal Anomaly. It's going to pulse and apply Echoes to 2 players. It might apply it to the pet. We'll have to see. Again, it probably applied it to the pet. It applies 2 Echoes, and then it pulses again, and it applies 2 Echoes, and it applies 2 Absorbs per pulse. Again, total of 6 Absorbs, total of 6 Echoes, and you can see it takes a little bit of a time. It travels slower because once it detects an ally, it kind of stops, and in raid environment it can actually be awkward if you have some range standing in front of here and then all the melee are really far behind. It can actually cause some issues. So, and now when we go to the PTR service, you'll notice that Temporal Anomaly has changed significantly. You'll notice here that it's going to absorb certain amount of damage on you and allies in its path. Absorption is reduced beyond 5 targets. On live servers, per Temporal Anomaly, it's going to pulse 3 times, and it's going to, every single pulse is going to apply an absorption on 2 allies. So there is certain changes to how the absorption is working. I'm not sure how big of the change this is going to be because I didn't get to test raids on PTR, but significantly you'll notice Resonating Sphere, Temporal Anomaly applies Echoes, again the same kind of thing, to the first 6 allies it passes. So it is applying 6 Echoes, just like on live servers, but the absorption is a little bit different, which again we'll have to see, and the delivery method is a lot different. So this is just to showcase how fast Temporal Anomaly is going to be, and I think this is a big quality of life change because you can just cast Temporal Anomaly from here, and it's going to speed through, and you can see it right now, everybody got Echoes almost instantly. And all of those people also have an Absorb on them. So this is a lot faster, a lot smoother, and the orb itself does not slow down when it detects an ally. So I think this is a big quality of life improvement in terms of how you're going to spread your Echoes using Temporal Anomaly. But now we have to go to some of the other changes in terms of the cooldown. There has been a significant cooldown applied to Temporal Anomaly, which means you cannot cast it as often as you could on live servers. And now we can see Temporal Anomaly cooldown has increased to 15 seconds or 6 seconds, and this is probably going to be the biggest change that happened for Preservation Evokers in this patch, because depending on how you use your Temporal Anomaly, and again we're going to talk about this in the gameplay section of this video in terms of how to prime your stasis, or what are the possible changes that are happening in the next patch in terms of how you prime your stasis. It is kind of factual to say that you won't use Temporal Anomaly as much as you used to. There are certain builds out there, again, people who are using Temporal Anomaly on cooldown, who are being fed innervates, and who probably use something like Verdant Embrace and Lifebind build to provide insane amount of burst healing, basically revival on a really short cooldown. Those type of people will probably have decrease in their HPS. Now, a lot of the people don't play like that. A lot of people don't use Temporal Anomaly on cooldown. They don't use it every 6 seconds. They don't have innervates, or they don't do content where bosses last 2 or 3 minutes. So this might not be as impactful as people think it will be, because generally or personally, I don't use Temporal Anomaly every 6 seconds. I don't abuse this ability as much as other people tend to do it. So this is not going to be as big of a decrease in HPS as a lot of people tend to think. I don't think this is the end of the world. I don't think this is the time to re-roll from Preservation Evoker. We're going to talk more about the cooldown increase later on in the gameplay section. Let's go to Nosdormu's teachings has been redesigned. Now reduces the cooldown of empowered spells by 5 seconds when Temporal Anomaly is cast. Let's go and have a look at this on the PTO servers. So right now you can see this is my Preservation Evoker on PTO servers, and I do have Nosdormu's teachings right here, and you can see here Temporal Anomaly reduces the cooldown of your empowered spells by 5 seconds. So, for example, if I have my Fire Breath on cooldown, if I have my Dream Breath on cooldown, if I have my Spirit Bloom on cooldown, you can see it right here. If I use Temporal Anomaly, pay attention to these 3 abilities. The cooldown is reduced, and now you can use these abilities more often. For example, how many times have you done Halls of Valor Hurge, or how many times have you done Ruby Life Pools in terms of tyrannical bosses, and you're like, I need my Spirit Bloom, I need my Dream Breath to align properly so I can heal people, or maybe you misuse those abilities and they don't align and people are going to die. This ability is going to allow you to make more mistakes in order to align your cooldowns, because again, Spirit Bloom, Dream Breath, they're really important in high-end Mythic Plus, especially tyrannical keys. And more importantly, you can reduce the cooldown of Fire Breath. This used to be bugged on PTR for a really long time. It's been fixed right now, but you can see it here. If you use Fire Breath and if you use Temporal Anomaly, it's going to reduce the cooldown of Fire Breath, and then you can use more Fire Breaths, which also going to provide more damage and healing if you have abilities or talents like Life Giver's Flame, where Fire Breath heals a nearby injured ally for 40% of damage done up to 5 targets. And this is going to be an ability or talent that you use in Mythic Plus. This is not a build for Mythic Plus that I'm using right now. I'm just trying to showcase it. So, more cooldown reduction on powered abilities. I believe that this talent is going to be very popular, or how do I say, it's something that a lot of Mythic Plus players are going to test out. They're going to try and get a feel for this. I'm not sure if this is going to be meta, but I think this is an intriguing talent, especially in Mythic Plus content. Do I think it's going to be better than Resonating Spheres in raids? I honestly don't know. I think it depends on the content you're doing, whether it's going to be normal, heroic, or mythic. Because if you're doing normal or heroic, Temporal Anomaly, the absorb effect is absolutely huge, and applying echoes and things like that can be really strong. So, generally speaking, this talent, don't sleep on this. Try it out, test it out, see if it works for you. If you're a Mythic Plus pusher, I think this is going to be something very interesting. In those other talent changes, there has been a buff to Time of Need. This used to have a proc cooldown of 90 seconds, now in 60 seconds. And this is a talent that already saw some play in current Mythic Plus environment in Season 1 in live servers in Dragonflight. Because hey, it is kind of, you know, an ability that can prevent deaths. The cooldown has been reduced. I think it's really nice. This is something that, again, how do I say, a lot of people in Mythic Plus environment might still be picking something like Energy Loop with something like Natural Convergence, because they want to use Disintegrate so they can get mana back, so they don't have to sit and eat. Because you have to remember, Season 1 Thundering Affix gives you 0 mana, and a lot of the times, especially in push Mythic Plus environment, you don't want the healer to stop the whole group from progressing or pushing or pulling more trash or doing bosses. You want your healer to be full mana all the times. And even though Preservation Evoker it's a very mana-friendly healer, a lot of people still tend to pick something like Energy Loop. I do think that a lot of people might reconsider. They might look at Time of Need. They might look at this in terms of, hey, every 1 minute, do I think I need this? I think this will have some potential to be included in some of the Mythic Plus builds, depending on which content you're doing, depending if you need mana or not, depending on which affixes. Overall, I think it's interesting. I don't think it's groundbreaking, but it is a buff. Now let's move on to the next change, and this is going to be casting. Again, this change, casting echoes directly after Living Flame or Spirit Bloom will no longer consume the echo effect. You're either a person who has no idea what this means, or you're either a person who's upset about this, or someone who's happy about this, because honestly, this is something that people will either have used, especially in Mythic Plus environment, or something that annoyed people in raid environment because they were setting up their echoes for something else like reversion, just to showcase what it actually is. So this is live service right now because you won't have this interaction in patch 10.0.5 because it's being removed. So if you have, for example, Leaping Flames, or for example, if you're casting Living Flame on someone in your party, that Living Flame is going to have a travel time. So if you cast echoes on that person, Living Flame is going to hit after the echo has been applied. Living Flame is going to heal that person and is also going to be replicated by echo. And you can do this to provide more healing in something like Mythic Plus environment, or if you're doing raid environments, you can have something like this. So just to showcase it, because it can be annoying. Some people will find this change annoying, some people will find this useful. So let's say I have Leaping Flames and I'm casting max rank Fire Breath. My Leaping Flames are right here, and I'm going to cast Living Flame on this enemy, and then cast an Echoes on a friendly target. So you saw that I casted Echoes, and that Echo was procced by Living Flame because I had Leaping Flames. So you might be like, oh, I wanted to do that, or you might be like, hey, where did my Echo go? I wanted to use that Echo for something like Reversions, or maybe I want to use that Echo for my Emerald Communion Lifebind ramp. So this change, either a good change for you, depending on how you look at it. I personally consider this to be a positive change because I do a lot of raiding environments and I want to use my Echoes not for Living Flame. I want to use my Echoes for something like Reversions because, again, the 2-set bonus for Preservation Evoker is really strong. But again, not a big change depending on how you played Evoker in the live servers. So now on to the last changes, and they're all to do with Emerald Communion, and it is relatively difficult to see whether it's going to be a positive or negative. I personally won't lose any sleep over this, and I'm going to showcase why. So Emerald Communion will no longer cancel if the Evoker is disoriented or feared during the channel, whatever, that's fine, maybe PvP, more of a PvP change. Emerald Communion will now properly calculate its overhealing value. It would sometimes heal less than expected. No way for me to really test this in terms of what is the potential output of this. I'm not sure because it's just really hard to test. In addition, it's healing to allies. This is very, very important. Allies can no longer critically heal, and people might be reading into this and they're like, oh my god, this is over, Emerald Communion ramp is over. From my understanding, this is not going to affect the most important part, which is going to be apply Echoes on everyone in raid or as many people as possible, use Verdant Embrace, this is going to proc Lifebind, and then use Emerald Communion, and the healing on yourself is going to be, or a portion of that healing on yourself is going to be replicated to people with Lifebind. My understanding, that is not going to change. What is going to, again, I might be wrong, if you tested this, let me know if I made a mistake, again, this is PTR. My understanding of this is that the healing to allies that it provides, when it's overhealing on you, it's no longer can crit. And just to showcase how it works on live servers right now. These are live servers right now, and I have my logs right here just to showcase how it works on live. But just so you know, Emerald Communion, when it's healing on you, it always does consistent healing and it cannot crit. So that aspect of it is not changing, and that is probably the most important aspect, because the healing on yourself is the one that's going to be, again, a portion of it is going to be replicated to people with Lifebind, which is the most important aspect of how we use Emerald Communion. But for example, again, on live servers, we're going to go, and this is going to be a random party here, and I'm going to use Emerald Communion, and just pay attention. You can see that the healing on myself, it's healing a nearby ally because it's overhealing. So you can see here, Emerald Communion healed me, it's healing for a certain amount, and then it's also healing an ally, and you can see here, Emerald Communion healed Soul the Survivalist, and it crit. It provided a crit. So that aspect is no longer available on PTR servers. It cannot crit on allies when it's overhealing on myself. But that's not that big of a deal, because most of the time Emerald Communion is used in those Lifebind, Verdant Embrace, burst healing potentials or moments in raid situation. If you're someone who's doing PvP, if you're someone who's doing Mythic Plus content, and for example, you're doing Mythic Plus content, you didn't apply Echoes, you didn't apply Verdant Embrace, you didn't apply Lifebind, then maybe that is going to be a little bit of a negative change for you. But the fact that Emerald Communion now prefers players over pets also is a positive thing. So honestly, when looking at all of the Emerald Communion changes announced in 10.0.5, I'm not going to lose any sleep over this. There's some positives, there's some negatives. I think the most important aspect of Emerald Communion is the Lifebind interaction, and from my understanding, that's not really going to change. So again, nothing really too major for me. The biggest and most important change is the fact that Temporal Anomaly has its cooldown changed. It's a lot longer right now. I think overall this is a quality of life improvement. I think this is a nerf, and it might be a big nerf depending on how you play your Temporal or your Preservation Evoker right now. Are you trigger happy with your Temporal Anomaly? I think this is a buff. I think this is going to be really nice talent, or something that you can actually experiment, especially in Mythic Plus environments. Again, I think this is nice. I think the delivery method of Temporal Anomaly in Resonating Sphere is a lot better because it applies echoes instantly. So you can use it on something like Reversions. I think it's really, really nice. Time of Need buff, pretty nice. Casting Echoes, this again, it's either a buff or nerf depending on how you play. You might not even be aware of this at all, so this is a no issue. And the Emerald Communion change, I'm not losing sleep over this. Let's go and have a look at the gameplay or possible gameplay alterations in patch 10.0.5 based on these changes. So right now what we see are the live servers, and I want to showcase how people are using stasis, especially in raid environments, because I think the uses of stasis might actually change in patch 10.0.5 because of temporal anomaly changes. So first of all, a lot of people are doing raids, they might be popping stasis, they might be using temporal anomaly, and then they can't heal or can't use healing abilities other than temporal anomaly because they want to store temporal anomaly. They might be using something like living flame to DPS. Temporal anomaly came off cooldown. I'm DPSing, I'm casting living flame, I'm not casting fire breath with leaping flames because that could be awkward. Then I cast temporal anomaly. Now I have triple temporal anomaly stored in my stasis. Let's say damage is about to happen, or you pop your stasis, you shoot out 3 temporal anomalies, that applies absorbs, that applies echoes, and then you use something like Verdant Embrace into Emerald Communion. This is a huge amount of burst healing that you can do, and a lot of people might be doing that both in normals, heroics, and mythic content. Now, you might not always be using temporal anomaly in stasis. You might be using something like, again, I can't really showcase this, but you might pop stasis, you might pop Verdant Embrace, you might pop Dream Breath, and then use your max rank Spirit Bloom, and that is going to be a pretty good way of providing a lot of burst healing, upfront burst healing with your stasis. This is probably the most 2 common ways of priming your stasis in raid environments. Let's look at how that might change in 10.0.5. And right now we see is the PTR service right now for patch 10.0.5. Thank goodness that they actually fixed the bug where stasis, or you were not able to put temporal anomaly into stasis. That was there for a really long time, but it's been fixed and it's no longer an issue. You can store temporal anomaly in stasis and it's fine. But right now, if you're proccing or want to do the same kind of build or priming of stasis that you did in live service with the temporal anomaly, you can use stasis and then you can use temporal anomaly. But because it is a 15-second cooldown, you're going to spend a lot of time DPS. So there is a lot of downtime where you literally cannot heal, you just have to wait for your temporal anomaly to come back off cooldown. And the fact that temporal anomaly provides, or how do I say, it applies echoes instantly, I don't think there's going to be much reason to store 3 temporal anomalies. I think there is going to be certain people who'll try it, who'll experiment with it, but a lot of the times storing 3 temporal anomalies is going to be relatively awkward, and it's something that people might not do. Now, this is something that is also relatively backed up by a couple of the mods in, again, EVOKER Discord. I highly encourage people to go and check out EVOKER Discord for any questions, any vetted information. I think they're really, really good. I'll include the link in the description. But what about other stasis interactions that you could use in the next patch? Again, on live service right now, again, we talked about this, the possible stasis, Verdant Embrace, Dream Breath, and then max rank Spirit Bloom. This is a really strong burst healing kind of stasis combo. I think there is an argument to be made, and I think this is also, again, mentioned, backed up by a couple of mods in the Preservation Evoker Discord. There could be an argument made for a different combination for stasis, because I think temporal anomaly, or the new reworked temporal anomaly, there is a lot of quality of life improvements to it. So you could use something like, for example, stasis. You use Verdant Embrace because Verdant Embrace is going to buff your next Dream Breath. You use Dream Breath, and then use something like temporal anomaly. And now you're going to have 3 spells stored into your stasis that provides a lot of burst healing potential, or at least provides, you know, HOTS through your Dream Breath, which is going to be empowered because of your Verdant Embrace. And then you'll have your temporal anomaly, which, in my opinion, there is, again, the delivery method has been improved. And I think this could be something that people might experiment in raid environments and things like that. Again, I don't know everything. I'm not sure what people are going to be using. This is just my assumptions right now, because I do like temporal anomaly changes, except I don't like the cooldown. But I like the delivery method changes. So just to summarize the video, I think there's a lot of positives, and there's a couple of scary things about the changes for Preservation Evoker. I genuinely believe that the fact that temporal anomaly delivery system has been changed, I think that's only a good thing, because look at the zoom. It applies echoes almost instantly, applies absorbs and things like that. I think it's like a chi burst for Mistweaver monks, and I think that's really, really interesting. I think the fact that temporal anomaly has a longer cooldown is going to be scary for a lot of people who tend to abuse temporal anomaly. There's a lot of people who do something, for example, like normal raid content, and they just spam temporal anomaly, and that's going to be your #1 heal, because the absorbs are going to be really strong in content where there's not a lot of damage. If you're a type of player who likes to spam temporal anomaly and gets innervates constantly, and then, for example, does something like Teros, where there's intermittent damage happening every now and then there's nothing really happening. Let's say you're doing that kind of content, you're applying your temporal anomaly, you apply your echoes, and then you use your Verdant Embrace, and then you're sniping everyone else because it provides a lot of burst healing. If you do that a lot, you might have, or this change will impact you. If you're a type of person who doesn't use temporal anomaly all that often, which I feel a lot of people don't, because they can't sustain the mana, they might use it once in a while, and they might use it on something like reversion, so it applies a hot and you provide consistent healing. This won't be that big of an issue. There will be or how do I say, I should say something about the fact it will be relatively awkward to apply a bunch of echoes on people for your Emerald Communion, because if you want to store it into your stasis, it might be more difficult. But there's no reason not to cast, again, this is something that people do. People apply or activate stasis before the boss fight. They activate stasis, they cast their temporal anomaly, and they store their temporal anomalies in stasis before the actual fight starts. Or they just use temporal anomalies on people so it applies echoes, then they pull the boss, and then they can use something like Verdant Embrace into Emerald Communion. And you can use this on fights like Terras and multiple other fights because there is damage happening very, very early in the fight. There's no reason to not do that in 10.0.5, especially if you're trying to prime for that Emerald Communion Lifebind kind of burst healing. I'm overall not really concerned about Preservation Evoker in 10.0.5. I think it's going to be very interesting. I think Preservation Evoker is still a very strong healer. You don't have to re-roll from it if you're thinking about this. I think, again, there's quite a few buffs to certain talents. There's quite a few changes to certain talents. It is interesting to note that this type of playstyle, if we didn't have the tier set bonus, because the tier set bonus, the 2-set bonus is so strong, people are still most likely in 10.0.5 are going to be running the reversion build or the unlimited hot build because the tier set is so strong. If we didn't have this tier set, I think there could be arguments for different possible builds emerging, but for the time being, because of the tier set and because of the nerfs, even because of the temporal anomaly nerfs, I think people are still going to be playing the same type of build. But we'll have to see how this is going to change in the future. So when looking at all of the changes, I do think certain people will see this as a nerf based on how they play the Preservation Evoker in raids, based on how often they use Temporal Anomaly. But I also think a lot of people will have very little impact, again, depending on how they play Preservation Evoker and how they use Temporal Anomaly. And I could almost say that this could be viewed as a slight buff to something like Mythic Plus Environment, with some of the Nosdormus teachings might be very, very interesting to use. And I could also say that there might be a slight change or balance in terms of stats because how haste works with temporal anomaly. So there is quite a few interesting things happening to Evoker in patch 10.0.5. And if you like this video, please like and subscribe. Check out the Evoker Discord, it's a great source of information, and let me know how you feel about all of the Evoker changes in the next patch, and I'll see you in my next guide.